The next question here is from Mark Silverman. Do you see geoengineering, chemtrails, EMS, etc., destroying the world? What's happening is that all of what you just mentioned is the number, probably, let's say the number one or number two cause for what we would just see like as a person being somewhat glazed over in the reality. It's like they still at the club. It's like whether it was to get themselves together, get their parents together, somebody died, all those different things that would generally move you to doing something and you're just still doing the same thing over and over again. When you suffer from chemical toxification, right, which can happen really with drinking too much soda. But when you suffer from that kind of thing, what it does to your brain is the brain actually doesn't have the same neurological charge. So that means thoughts don't come through as fast. You start to forget things. And overall, it's basically acid versus alkaline. It starts to deteriorate the body, deteriorate the consciousness. So there's also another thing, though, with the human body, which is actually discovered in many organisms, is that the more that when something happens to it that begins to that it needs to evolve through, it begins that process. So in many cases, the children of the parents that may have taken in some of these chemtrails and this GMO, etc., the children actually become more resilient to it from a genetic degradation level. This doesn't mean that there isn't a result, but the body naturally creates the resistance to things that drive it into a specific direction. So I see personally that it's almost like we're so powerful. It's like even trying to get our energy to become half of what it is, or 75% of what it is a strong agenda. And this is also why people sometimes feel exhausted, or they feel like there's too much work and trying to stay up all night and this is just too much. And like, how many times even have you said that? Like all the time, you feel like, man, am I really getting at something here? Some people, we come to feeling like that, right? And that has a lot to do with the food that's in the stomach. That has a lot to do with chemicals, right? Like there's certain things that you can realize already about the consciousness, about how much of it is a chemical imbalance or a chemical balance or imbalance. When you start studying serotonin, melatonin, even what substances like MDMA do when it pushes that all the way through the back and through the spine and you feel the euphoria, right? So anytime that the body, like even from monitors, screens, cell phones, those kind of things, take in a lot of that, then there's juices that are being produced that don't need to be produced. Like a male can feel extremely pent up and stagnated by sitting at a computer all day, right? So there's in the female the same way. So there's a lot of things that happen with our interaction, and it could account for why you have this lack sometimes of understanding of what's happening. But this is only in a certain intent to cause a certain kind of effect. Like the earth itself, the organism that we're on, the consciousness that we're in, it gradually progresses anyway. Now, if there are some artificial things going on that are holding things back, meaning it's like intentional, it's not the natural way of nature, it's an intentional way of something trying to hold society back, trying to make you dumb, introducing languages that are stupid, those kind of things, then what this creates is it creates like a pent up amount of energy, right? It's like you being excited and want to go and do something, but being in a cage, right? And eventually you get strong enough and you blow, right? Now, what that blow looks like, though, that's really where you could do yourself a favor and do your best to start really cultivating your consciousness properly. Because I have a high inclination, and this is not something I've necessarily introduced in any of my work, but I have a high inclination that when you come out of the body, that's when it happens. What they call death, is that now there's no governor. So how you've been processing the reality thus far is gone. And then what happens is an entirely different type of field. You become aware of an entirely different kind of field. And I always say, well, hopefully at that point, it's like when you're dreaming and you start doing stuff in your dream that you don't necessarily know how to do in this world. Like, you ever played an instrument in the dream and you were good, just blowing that saxophone. You know, you may have written down a song and it's just, you know, it's the perfect lyrics and everything. Or, you know, you may done something in a dream and it's just like, you know how to execute it perfectly. I still have a high inclination that if there's not too much programming going on in the consciousness, in the relationship between the person and their consciousness, that they go unhindered right away. And this is also what you see when you utilize certain substances, the energetic signature. If I was to do a timesing, I would say times 10 in an exponential strength of the energy that you have coursing through your body when you start letting go of, actually in this case, the vibratory frequency of the organs begin to accelerate. Okay, so when that happens, the perception of the consciousness and everything that you're experiencing, it goes to, I mean, I'm just explaining like the 101 about, you know, a journey or experience. But because of that, it gives me the high notion and inclination, because when you start searching, okay, so what's causing this expansion and what can cause a greater expansion? The chakra centers turn on and it gets the body to a certain frequency, but then it's almost like, and that's why you see some people, they rock like this. Like even in, you know, certain levels of genuflection, that rocking can become like almost to a point, it's almost like a Sufi. You just get this spiral thing going on with your field and it's almost perpetual. It doesn't really need you. Even if you physically lean back against it, you could feel it spinning around you. So when that thing gets going, it's almost like a sequence of a rocket in itself. You're taking off. So the body gets into a perpetual spin phase, and then you go right into another state of the consciousness. And what I'm saying is that when that actually occurs, and if that is in fact what happens when you die, your orientation at that point, that's why they call it death. Because whatever you perceived you were before, that just gets blown open. It's like you're no longer just that. See, some people look at it differently. They think that you get less, but that's not actually what happens. You get so much more. It's foreign. And this is why you have to get yourself prepared for it now. It's kind of foreign to receive that much. Think about it. It's like a lot of people right now are boosting their energy so much that, or on different levels, let's say financially, it's almost impossible for them. It's like unbelievable. And they're watching the unbelievable happening and they're still having an issue with accepting it. That's what higher consciousness is like. Every day, you just have to accept it.